President Akufo-Addo gives strongest indication of Ghana securing
in July 2022. We continue to work tirelessly to complete all prior actions required to present Ghana's program to the IMF Executive Board.
Meanwhile, Trades Union Congress is demanding conversion of funds and incitement for construction of National Cathedral to a hospital.
The government can do so by cutting expenditure on non-essentials, including the need to stop spending our hard-earned revenue on a national cathedral.
And one person dead, 3 others injured as 3-story building collapses in Adenta.
We were casting a 3rd floor, and then within some few seconds the building collapsed. We must have done about several bags of cement, and that was exactly what happened.
And later to come on CNR Extra, thousands renew faith in Christ at 2023 edition of City FM and TV Family Consecration Service at Winners Chapel, Ghana.
We thought, yes, let's do something that will bring families together. But I don't think we foresaw what we are seeing today, that a day was coming, we're going to count thousands. And over the time, it's been
Once again, welcome to CNR Extra live on CCTV. You can join us with your thoughts, submissions, and comments via WhatsApp line 0204447033. We are streaming live on YouTube, and you can join us there on CityTube. Need Latte, you are welcome to the month of May.
Yeah, it's a new month. Happy new month, as they say.
Happy new month. So we are hoping that this month is going to be a month of blessings to all of us.
Exactly. Given the fact that yesterday we did our family consecration services. So
very true. On that note, let's bring you the first story. And TUC, that is the Trades Union Congress, is calling on government to review the single spine salary structure policy. Let's bring you that insight.
And the Trades Union Congress, TUC, is calling on government to review the single spine salary structure policy to reflect the prevailing economic hardship facing Ghanaian workers. The TUC made this known during this year's May Day celebration held in Bolgatanga, in the Upper East region, where President Akufo-Addo was in attendance. There's more in this report by our correspondent in the region, Frederick Awuni.
May 1 every year is set aside to celebrate Ghanaian workers for their contribution to national development. This year's May Day, celebrated in Bolgatanga in the Upper East region, was on the theme Protecting Incomes and Pensions in an Era of Economic Crisis, Our Responsibility. The celebration saw workers from both formal and informal sectors of the country showcase their respective institutions. The labor unions expressed worry at their poor working conditions. Addressing the occasion, Secretary General of the Trades Union Congress, TUC, Dr. Yao Ba, called for a review of the single spine salary structure to reflect the prevailing economic challenges.
We will no longer accept a situation where Article 71 office holders are awarded huge pay increases with fat allowances, while some workers on the single spine continue to receive less than 600 Ghana cedis per month. We are therefore calling on you, Mr. President, to ensure that the single spine pay policy is reviewed to reflect this. By cutting expenses, including the National Cathedral.
In a bid to address Ghana's economic crisis, government is seeking a $3 billion IMF bailout. President Nana Akufo-Addo assured Ghanaian workers that his outfit is working assiduously to fulfill all requirements at securing the IMF Executive Board approval.
After achieving a staff-level agreement with the IMF in December 2022 in record time, 6 months after beginning the negotiations in July 2022, we've continued to work to present. We've also made substantial progress on the debt exchange program, as well as on our engagements with bilateral creditors to secure financing assurance required for the IMF program. We are assured that the next round of meetings of the Paris Club will result in the formation of an official creditor committee, inclusive of China, and the provision of financing assurance. The IMF and the World Bank have been very supportive in this journey. With the progress made so far, we expect the IMF board to consider Ghana's program for imminent approval after the financing assurances are provided.
But some labor unions have been expressing their frustrations about what they describe as government's lackadaisical attitude in addressing their concerns.
Service workers are not happy. We are not happy because we are the third arm of government rendering critical service to the people of Ghana. Unfortunately, our salaries has not been reviewed for 2 years, 4 months now. We were supposed to have our salaries reviewed and paid to us in the month of January 2022. That has not been done. We've gone through a lot. The COLA that we were enjoying ended in December, and we thought that government would have expedited action for us to enjoy a new salary where the COLA was going. Unfortunately, that did not happen.
We want to call the president to really look at the taxes. The taxes are actually not going to help development. Now, with all these taxes, we can be sure that a lot of employers in the private sector are going to lay out workers.
And of course, the Trades Union Congress is asking that government should review the single spine salary structure or policy, and also made mention of something very important that has to do with the National Cathedral, that if the funds used for the National Cathedral could be used into something else like a hospital. Does it mean that there is misplaced priority here? But first, with their single spine structure or the policy, they've been calling on the revision of this policy for quite some time now.
And we only expect that, given the situation that we have on our hands, especially because government wants to use the funds of workers to restructure its debt ahead of that IMF bailout, you realize that the conversation that will be topical as better conditions of service among these public sector workers. Philip, it's been over a decade since the introduction of the single spine salary structure, and ever since it was introduced, no review whatsoever has been made at all, and you will realize that a lot of labor unions have always been calling for a review of this particular issue, because they say that it has outlived its purpose. The objective for which it was established has not been achieved over the years, and so the time is ripe for government and other stakeholders in the industry to ensure that they look into this particular issue. And I remember last year, for example, the Labour Minister Ignatius Balfour saying that government will look at a review of this particular single spine salary structure. And the issue is quite simple. Given the bad economic situation that we are experiencing as a country, we realize that the incomes of a lot of public sector workers and even workers in general keeps eroding. And so today you have this X amount of money. The following day you go to the market and
very interesting is also with the National Cathedral. They are saying that we can get out of this economic hardship or this economic situation if the funds channeled or used for the building of the National Cathedral is channeled into something else.
Well, the conversation on this particular one has also been topical. And we realize that people are saying that government has misplaced priorities, although the president insists that the construction of the National Cathedral is a priority amongst priorities. My fear is that if the government fails to, complete this particular project, it becomes a white elephant because successive governments would not want to, continue with it. And so government's insistence on constructing this particular project brings the issue of the lack of burden sharing. You admit that times are hard. The government is cash-strapped. There is no money for us to go about our normal activities. Yet you are channeling resources into a project that a lot of Ghanaians are not too enthused about. And if you listen to people, and my fear is that if a proper use is not found for the cathedral, you realize that all the issues that have happened in the past will become a waste of, state resources.
And looking at the proper use of funds or proper use of money, we have the DDEP on our table right now. But still, Clockside has sent a stern warning to government not to touch pension funds of members as part of reviewing the economy. Let's bring you that insight.
Now, on the part of the Civil and Local Government Staff Association, that's CLOCSAG, it has sent a stern warning to government not to touch pension funds for members as part of efforts in reviving the economy. The warning is on the back of government's plans to include pension funds in its debt exchange program. The following report has more.
Hundreds of workers across the country on May 1 celebrated Workers' Day. The celebration was issued a warning to government not to touch their pensions as part of efforts in reviving the economy. Here is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the association, Kojo Krakrani.
At this point in time, where the country has been thrown into a crisis to the extent that pension arrangements are being threatened, even though the contributory three-tier pension scheme has begun to yield positive results, it is very relevant and significant to maintain the existing pension structure. CLOSAC is sending a warning signal to all forces, both visible and invisible, to steer clear of current pension arrangements as enshrined in the National Pension Act 2008 Act 766. He who has ears, let him hear this message. CLOSAC is sending a warning signal to all forces, both visible and invisible, to steer clear of current pension arrangements as enshrined in the National Pensions Act 2008 at 766. He who has ears, let him hear this message.
The 2023 May Day celebration was under the theme, Protecting Income and Pensions in an Era of Economic Crisis, Our Responsibility. Speaking at the Independence Square in Accra to mark the celebration, the Greater Accra Regional Minister Henry Korti, on the other hand, assured organized labour that government would not touch the funds of workers in its debt restructuring exercise.
Be assured that government is committed to the reforms to ensure better wages and salaries and pensions of the Ghanaian worker. We would like to allay your fears about the speculations that the government wants to touch workers' pensions. May I repeat this part? We would like to allay your fears about the speculations that the government responsibility to ensure that the Ghanaian worker is properly rewarded and retired honorably after many years of toil. The government is still committed to the MOU signed in December 2022
On behalf of Organized Labour, the Greater Accra Regional Secretary of the Council of Labour, Frida Frimpong, says the government must consider cutting down on expenditure in non-essentials, such as funding to the National Cathedral, to help save the economy from collapse.
The IMF provides ample evidence that the IMF-sponsored programs and policies cannot change our economic circumstances. Another IMF program will only impose more economic burden on us. We have to change the situation ourselves. We believe that government can lead us out of this crisis by cutting expenditure on non-essentials, including the need to stop spending our hard-earned hospital. Honorable Minister, a brother chair, you can also reduce the size of your government. Ghana has too many ministers and deputy ministers. Revenue mobilization efforts should be intensified, but we caution against the excessive use of aggressive taxes which impose a disproportionate burden on local businesses and on poor people in society.
Still on the May Day celebrations, let's take you to the Ashanti region, specifically Kumasi, where organized labor is also asking government to cut down its expenditure.
The demands for better conditions of service dominated the 2023 May labor call on the government to
drawn from different worker unions out was better conditions of service and how the pensions of the Ghanaian worker can be protected. Ashanti Regional Secretary of the Trades Union Congress, Augustine Adongwa Pambila, calls for a halt in the construction of the National Cathedral project, which he added should be converted into a national hospital.
We believe that government can lead us out of this crisis by cutting expenditure on non-essentials, including the need to stop spending our hard project into a national hospital. Honorable Minister, you can also reduce the size of your government. Ghana has too many ministers and deputy ministers.
The TUC also wants the government to protect the incomes of workers amid the current economic crisis.
We want to take this opportunity to serve notice that if inflation remains high, organized labor will continue to demand wage increases that reflect inflation and the high cost of living. That is the only way we can guarantee a living wage and higher standard of living for working people of Ghana.
Ashanti Regional Minister Simon Osei-Mensah says government was working to address the concerns of workers and insists labor must also be productive at their various workplaces.
Let me be quick to add that government is expecting the workforce to give all their best at their workplaces and stations, as much as it is their right to seek better incomes and conditions of service. Workers also have the responsibility to work to increase the productivity levels at their workplaces. The era where workers approach to work with lackadaisical attitudes and frankly than abuses at work should be a thing of the past.
Members of the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association also spoke to City News about some concerns they want to be addressed.
Things are expensive. People are living in this country because the conditions here are not good. The conditions there are not all that better. But because we are here economically we are struggling. People are working 10 years, 12 years without steady leave. People have been promoted, have not been placed on their expected grade. These are things that are demotivating nurses and midwives in the country. So we want government to do something about it. Those who are working the hard-to-reach area, we are asking for rural incentive allowance for them. Though recently they instituted 2 years for first promotion, 4 years for second promotion. But we are saying that government should give them something, because these are areas that they lack some basic amenities. Networks are poor there, the roads are almost trouble, conditions there are bad.
Organized labor says it will continue to engage the government until the key concerns of the public worker are addressed.
The major concern for members of organized labor is how governments can address their conditions of service. Hafiz Tijani, City News, Kumasi, Ashanti region.
In the OT and the Volta regions, TUC says that they don't believe that the IMF bailout will do anything for the country. Let's bring you that insight.
Now, in the Volta and OT regions, the TUC said the IMF bailout, which government is seeking, cannot change the current economic crisis in the country, as it believes the country's economic situation is self-imposed and it has to be addressed by government itself. It called for a cut-down of the government and also a cut-down on expenditure. Our correspondent in the Volta region is Desmond Salasiago.
In the Volta region, trade unions, public sector workers and workers across the Volta and Oti regions converged on the Jubilee grounds in Ho to commemorate this year's May Day under the theme, Protecting Incomes and Pensions in an Era of Economic Crisis, Our Responsibility, addressing the gathering. Volta and Oti Regional Secretary of the Traders Union Congress, Edith Abla Amenu for Apenu, said, the union does not believe the current economic crisis faced in the country is as a result of the emergence of COVID-19 and subsequently the Russia-Ukraine war. According to her, government's mismanagement of the public purse has been exposed by the global crisis and says the IMF bailout which government is seeking cannot change our economic challenges, but to rather impose more burden on the ordinary Ghanaian worker.
IMF bailout has now become the lifeline for Ghana, in spite of our numerous human and natural resources. We in organized labor hold the view that the economic crisis we are experiencing in Ghana is self-imposed. We acknowledge the adverse effects of COVID-19 and the Russian-Ukraine war on the global economy, but we do not believe that these events are the fundamental causes of Ghana's economic crisis.
Volta and Oti Regional Secretary of the Traders Union Congress also called on government to cut down expenditure on non-essentials such as the size of government. She said, government should really look at the construction of the National Cathedral.
We have to change the situation ourselves. We believe that government can lead us out of this crisis by cutting expenditure on non-essentials, including the need to stop spending our hard-earned revenue on a national cathedral. It will be better to convert that project into a national hospital.
The Volta Regional Minister, Dr. Achiboye Alecha, said, government has recognized the contribution of workers in the country and says the restructuring of the domestic debt exchange will not affect workers and appeals to the unions to consider proposals brought by government to the organized labor.
Let me be quick to state that government will not do anything to shortchange the workers of Ghana under the domestic debt exchange program. Indeed, the restructuring of the domestic debt exchange is of mutual benefit to all parties involved, based on the critical point that we need to work together to salvage the economy.
In a City News interview, the Volta and Oti Union Chairman of the National Commission for Civic Education, Clement Kwesi Mamadou, said their personal savings have been affected by the domestic debt restriction and government must release their bonds as it is affecting their service delivery.
In February, bonds mature for them to pay, it has been rolled over. In March to pay, it has been rolled over. In April to pay, it has been rolled over. And all because government says it's an economic crisis. But these are our personal savings that we invested in government treasuries. We need our money. So we are only pleading for government to release whatever means they have to get the money. Our bonds should be paid to us.
The Volta and Oti Regional Branch of TUC say government must cut upon its expenditure, especially to help reduce the burden on its economy. Reporting for City News from the Volta Regional Capital, Ho, I'm Desmond Salasiago.
So TUC, organized labor, among others in the labor space, have raised concerns, and these concerns were heightened during the May Day celebration yesterday. Amongst the concerns, cutting down expenditure by government, channel the funds that is being used for the construction of the National Cathedral, specifically to a national hospital, debt exchange program, and also the reduction of government, amongst others. Looks like this has been on their chest for a very long time. And yesterday was the day
very
they
much
had
expected.
to now
Very much
vent.
expected. And I told you early on that looking at what is happening in our economy, you would expect that the labor unions will be making such calls. And even look at the theme for this year's celebration, protecting incomes and pensions, especially because I'm struggling to understand government's fixation with the use of, pension funds as far as the DDEP is concerned. Well, we heard that pension funds have been exempted, only for government to come in the last few weeks to say that there is an alternative, DDEP that will make use of, pension funds. And all labor unions across the board are not very much happy with the fact that government wants to use, the pension funds. And I think it's largely because there's been lack of, consultation among the various stakeholders. When you listen to people in the space, you get a sense that they were not even consulted. It was just government that woke up and said that we want to use, pension funds. And even look at what has happened, in the past with regards to the number of picketing that we've seen at the finance ministry. They even had to go to, Parliament to press home their demands. And for me, the kind of democracy we practice in this country, we know that democracy is the role of the people. If a lot of people are saying that, well, we are not very much okay with this particular move that you want to take, and the voice of the people, they've always been saying, is the voice of what? Of God. And so government should just find an alternative. And this alternative, many have also said, lies in the fact that the government must cut down on its expenditure, reduce the number of ministers. Government says no. Review some of your flagship programs. The government says no. Corruption still lingering on. Leakages as far as our revenue mobilization, even taxes, projects ongoing. And so I don't even know how you want to share in, government's, pain. The burden sharing must come from the very top. If government says that, look, I have so many deputy ministers, even ministers of state at the presidency, and if you look at the recent report that came as to the number of, presidential staffers at the Jubilee House, all these things do not send the right signals that government is ready. I think government is just okay going to the international markets, borrowing, begging, countries that help in the debt forgiveness, help in, our securing of the IMF bailout and all that. But I think we must find our homegrown solutions, as they made us believe. But the homegrown solution was also introduction of, e-levy. E-levy. Yes. Of course, taxes are good, but in our context, we've realized that the more you introduce taxes, because of the loopholes in the system, you will not rake in the necessary revenue. Look at what happened to e-levy, and today, the 3 new taxes have also, taken effect. We will come back to square one. You realize that these taxes are introduced, they are not able to meet their target, and the cycle continues. And so the government must find a proper way of dealing with our economic quagmire.
Well, TUC, organized labor, they've all made their concerns known. Government must cut down its expenditure, as well as ensuring that the DDE does not affect their pension funds, reduction of the government size, amongst others. Also, the National Cathedral construction is of great concern to them. This is what was made known during the May Day celebration. You are still watching CNR Extra here on CCTV. Let's bring you more. 1 person dead and 3 others injured as 3-story building collapses in Adenta. Stay with us with more. We'll be back after this break.
It's day 3 already. Setting off from Kumasi, Noda Hotel. It promises to be a long but exciting trip to Bolga. Passing through the famous Jinijini and Tuobodom, the commercial town of Techiman, through to Kentampo, to Tamale, Savalugu, Wale Wale, and finally Bolga Tanga. As the hours wear on, the landscape also transforms from the tropical forests of Ashanti and Puno areas to the savanna plains of the northern and upper regions. Join us on this exciting episode of the Heritage Caravan Diaries Day 3, showing every weekday on City TV.
Welcome back. This is CNR Extra here on City TV. You can join us with your thoughts, submissions, and comments via WhatsApp line 0204447033. We're also streaming live on YouTube on City TV. Let's bring you more stories. And the MP for South Dai, Roxin Dafiamepo, has filed a suit at the Supreme Court challenging the appointment of 2 members of the EC.
The Member of Parliament for South Dai, Roxin Nelson Eche Dafiamepo, has filed a suit at the Supreme Court challenging the appointment of Dr. Peter Achuahene and Hajja Salima Ahmed Tijani as members of the Electoral Commission. The appointment and swearing in of the 2 as members of the Electoral Commission has been heavily criticized on grounds that they are members of the New Patriotic Party. In his writ, the NDC legislator is asking the Apex Court to declare the appointments unconstitutional. Roxin Nelson Dafiamepo is also asking the Supreme Court to restrain the 2 from acting as members of the Electoral Commission until the final determination of the matter.
It's obvious this issue isn't dying anytime soon. Appointment of the members onto the Electoral Commission.
And you remember the NDC in particular has written to the Council of State for a reconsideration of this particular appointment. And I was just wondering why the Member of Parliament, well, it's in his own right, I listened to him on Eyewitness News yesterday. He is actually pushing for a proper interpretation on some of the, constitutional provisions that have to do with the appointment of persons onto the Electoral Commission.
Kodeyo has also spoken about
Kodeyo, in fact, and other political watchers have said that the appointment of these persons, quote unquote, known to be, strong NPP members, does not bode well for, the political space of the country. And so if you look at some of the reliefs, Roxin Nelson Dafiamepo is seeking, you realize that he is actually saying that the appointment should be declared unconstitutional, and also the 2 persons in particular should not continue to hold themselves as, members of the board of the Electoral Commission. And so let's see how this particular, court, the suit that has been filed by the lawmaker will pan out at the Supreme Court, which is the Apex Court that has to do with, the proper interpretation on some of these constitutional provisions.
Of course, we'll be following this story keenly, and we'll be bringing you all the updates on it. Away from this story to a very sad one. 1 person dead and 3 others severely injured when a story building collapsed which is under construction at SDA near Pogas.
1 person has died and 3 others severely injured when a 3-story building under construction collapsed at Adenta SDA near Pogas Furniture. Emergency services rushed to the scene and are currently investigating the cause of the collapse.
A tragic incident occurred on Monday at Adenta SDA near Pogas when a 3-story building collapsed. According to eyewitnesses, the owner of the building and foreman were nowhere to be found after the incident. NADMO, the police service, and other emergency services were quickly called to the scene, but the lack of equipment made the rescue effort difficult. Officials on the scene reported that they did not have the necessary equipment to extract the 4th person, who remained trapped under the rubble. The MP for Medina, Francis Xavier Sosu, who was at the scene, called for additional support and equipment to aid in the rescue.
My office had an emergency call that
3-story situated at, let's say, Pogas. May construction had just collapsed with 3 people injured in critical conditions who have been sent to the hospital and 1 person trapped under the rubble. So as the Member of Parliament, it was important that I would follow up to know the situation. Indeed, when I got here, I was extremely disappointed because when I got here, the fire service had already come and the NADMO officers were also here. But they were attempting to remove the rubble using shovels and pickaxes, and it was obvious that it was going nowhere. And at a point, they were using saws, normal hand saws, to attempt to even cut some of the metals. So we told them that it was not going to work. Obviously, it meant that we needed to do an emergency mobilization to get excavators to come and assist if we were going to get anywhere. So we started the calls. So this is the first excavator that is in. A second one is on its way coming. The hope is that we'll try and rescue the person who is trapped under the rubble. But honestly, I don't know. Already, I just feel like it's a hopeless situation, even though we have to try to do the best that we can.
A construction worker, Osabute Majeslo, explained to City News what happened.
Well, actually, what happened is that we were casting the 3rd floor concrete. Then all of a sudden the building collapsed. The whole thing. There was no blocks. It was only beams that has been cast, and then that was what collapsed. Yeah. I wasn't in the building. I was working downstairs. I was working on stones and assisting the machine operator as well. That wasn't on the building. Yeah.
The 4th victim was eventually pulled out of the debris, but was found dead.
I think we are very close at getting the person who is under the rubble. Exactly the status of that person is what we do not know. Whether he's alive or dead or whatever is the current state. It's our prayer that whatever be the case, he will be in it.
So that's a very sad one, and we say that the departed soul rest in perfect peace. But it has to do with structural integrity, and also it has to do with how well the project is being monitored as you have put it up. If it's a 3-story building, and the more it goes up, the more the burden becomes on the pillars. So I don't know what really may have been the issue. I'm sure they are conducting some investigations into the situation.
And it's really sad because we experience a number of these, situations in the capital, Accra. If you cast your mind back, you realize that we've recorded a number of, building collapses in the national capital. The infamous one, of course, and that has to do with the one that occurred in, Melcombe some time ago, and then some other ones that we've seen in the past. And for me, it's largely because of the, structural integrity that you've mentioned. And in this particular case, it's actually sad that the Member of Parliament for Madina, who was at the scene, painted a picture of, the situation as very disappointing because all the rescue officials who were there, that's officials from NADMO, Ghana Police Service, Ghana National Fire Service, were unable to, do their rescue mission because there was no equipment for them to enable them.
But the Ghana National Fire Service has come to respond to that they were able to go at least they were able to rescue.
But at what point? How
also,
did they go about it? Was it prompt? These are some of the issues that you may be asking. And like you mentioned, structural integrity also has to do with, the lack of enforcement of, building codes and laws, incompetent contractors, sometimes weak supervision and all that. And also the use of, inferior and substandard, products in the building industry. And for us as a country in Ghana, we are very lucky that some of these collapses do not happen because of natural forces like earthquakes and all that. So it should tell you that most of the times what happens actually, it has to do with, man-made activities. And so we have to, prioritize our own safety and health when it comes to some of these things at the various construction sites. We want to sympathize with the, the bereaved family, and also hope that the persons who are injured actually respond to treatment. And then a full-scale investigation must go on, because they said the foreman was not on site. He had no idea what was happening. And then people who are going there to fend for themselves and, the livelihoods of their family members will have to endure such, an unfortunate, situation.
Well, it's obvious that when a building is being put up, it has to be keenly monitored concerning story buildings of this nature. Well, the necessary things must be done. Away from this story, and the family of a 25-year-old lady, that is Eunice Na, who was allegedly killed by her husband, is demanding justice.
You're welcome back. Now, a family of a 25-year-old woman, Eunice Ame Na, who was allegedly killed by her husband, is demanding justice. The alleged culprit is said to have inflicted machete wounds on the deceased, who was attempting to serve him with a letter from legal aid to take custody of their 3-year-old son. There's more in this report by City News' Daniel Sakte and read by Nana Tufo-Boatin.
It was a solemn scene at the home of the late Eunice Amena, as at the time of City News' visit. Friends and other relatives of the deceased were trooping in to express their condolences to the bereaved family. According to relatives of the deceased, the couple have been married for 4 years with 2 children, a son who is 3 years old and a daughter who is 1.5 years old. However, the late Eunice Amena moved to settle in with her stepfather and mother with her 2 children in recent times, following years of domestic abuse from her husband, Isaac Newton Kuma. The man, unhappy with the situation, is reported to have taken custody of their 3-year-old son, who he consistently left in the care of others, a situation which made the deceased unhappy following multiple reports of neglect of the child. Father of the deceased, Michael Taina, narrates to City News events leading to the death of his daughter on Friday night at Nungwa Dikoman, after they attempted serving him with a letter from legal aid to take custody of the son.
Nti dan Friday no mi ko awia nti mi nante area no mo ho a na mi ko jira bebe bi okoja akola na mi usa akola ni mami no ho nti mi wo uncompleted bi wo ho na mi jira ho mo an say waba no ko mami no ho no mo di akola no mo kasa ya no ofa akola so akola no akola ni nanti no mo fa sa back down nti mi di omo achi nti ofa na mi fa main door na mi ko hia no obi on say da awu ba na wo frame na mi si o Senya bibia so da de bi so frame na msi wenya bibia o na mba no frame se mi ka chen se mi ko ho nti o ho a me frame no abanti ho na frame na msi o mra na o ho na si hwan na msi Eunice ni ma mi no mu ba na si de bi mo mu ma na msi a mo mu ma se nti mi ni wo dem na pie na o shi o mo gate na no nti so o shi o mo na ko ni kam na ko yi dade ni say why ready. Since that they not to come say anywhere or be share akola no say opese oyenti ade ode mi gyina ho obia ni stepfather gyina ho ni mami gyina ho nti e kasa na unexpected no o yes say odi time akola no effort odi na ho ndi odi hye mba ko bo na akola no kra ni ba uba usi uba o hye nachi.
Stepfather of the deceased, Ebenezer Jomo, explains to City News how he narrowly escaped death when the suspect, after allegedly killing Eunice, attempted to slash his head with a machete. He wants justice to prevail in the matter.
Diko ba me so na me so me rush no. Nti me ko ni so. Tina aye se me de no vim no nimu sa space no. Kanya sa ka me so twa me ku me te se de okun oba no. Ye mrane de nyame ne kitame nti ho de mintimi mfa bibia ma hye ho no de jama aban nti aban na ankasa ne nim seni omo ankasa omo be ya de no de mintimi nkase se anasisi ba ye de pe justice de beto no ese ye de to ho no obia ye free because untimi nkum obi keke samfa ho ni.
Meanwhile, some family members are faulting the Nungwa branch of the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Unit, DOVSU, of the Ghana Police Service for failing to settle initial complaints of abuse brought to it against Isaac Newton Kumar. Acting head of the family, Collins Ajay, in an interview with City News, urged the police to expedite processes for the release of the body of the late Eunice Amena for burial.
Na oma no krenye de emrasem num enu ani hia na bibia so nye dentem na akura se pidi tima fa no se me ka se ye de ade ni hye mu amfie bebre ba eno so omomwa ye ho se ometima bibia dentem na yetim na koto ba bia de obeda no anya na home enu na mesra.
A very sad one there, and of course justice must be served.
Exactly so, Philip, because if you look at the instances of, spousal killings that you've been recording in this particular month, or even last month, you remember what happened in Kumasi? Yeah, in Kumasi, and I was telling you about how families must be involved in the marriages of, their relatives, because marriage, as we know, is not only a union between the husband and the wife, but also of the two families. They should be involved, because I don't want to believe that this particular issue just happened on the spur of the moment.
But that's why the family is also blaming Dofsu.
I was coming to
for
that,
not paying attention to
this particular issue. And I'm just wondering why it should be the woman, serving the husband a letter from legal aid. What was the process when you want to, trigger some of these processes, and for the lady to lose her life in such a bizarre manner? It leaves so much to be desired as far as, our issues as far as these things are concerned. And so for me, I just want to believe that the police is going to be thorough in its investigations. Let this particular gentleman face the full rigors of the law.
Well, you're still watching CNR Extra here on CCTV, still to come. Thousands renew faith in Christ on 2023 edition of City FM and CCTV's family consecration service at Witness Chapel, Ghana. We'll bring you that story after this break.
It's day 3 already. Setting off from Kumasi, Noda Hotel. It promises to be a long but exciting trip to Bolga. Passing through the famous Jinijini and Tuopodom, the commercial town of Chichiman, through to Kintampo, to Tamale, Savalugu, Wale Wale, and finally Bolga Tanga. As the hours wear on, the landscape also transforms from the tropical forests of Ashanti and Puno areas to the savanna plains of the northern and upper regions. Join us on this exciting episode of the Heritage Caravan Diaries Day 3, showing every weekday on CCTV.
You're welcome back. Let's bring you what happened at CTFM and TV's family consecration service yesterday.